Hey folks, welcome to Gwent, the Witcher card game. I've been playing Gwent for a little under 2 weeks now. I just hit gold on the ladder, and I kind of finally feel like I have the experience necessary to introduce the game and kind of speak from a place of some knowledge. I'm by no means a master yet, I still have a lot to learn, but I'm at the point where I feel like I can talk about the basic elements of the game, with some certainty that what I'm saying isn't just totally stupid. So, in order to kind of introduce what's going on here, we're going to play a practice match against an AI opponent. I would play on the ladder, but the rounds are timed and the timer is pretty short, so it's nice to be able to kind of stop and explain what's going on. Yes, first thing to look at is the left-hand side of the screen here where we see our deck. A deck in Gwent consists of 4 different types of cards. The leader, gold cards, of which you can have a maximum of 4, silver cards, of which you can have a maximum of 6, and bronze cards, which you usually have 15 of. If you have the maximum gold and silver cards, then you'll end up with 15 bronze. But I'm actually playing 16 bronze in this deck for a very specific reason that I won't get into too much here. But yeah, so this is our deck. I don't really want to go through and talk about each of the individual card choices before we even talked about the rules of the game. So we're going to jump into a game here and play it, and maybe we can come back and talk about what's going on in this deck specifically when all is said and done. So we're going to start a battle here again against an AI opponent. And the first thing you're going to see is a playing field divided into 2 sets of 3 rows. My rows, which will be in blue, and my opponent's, which will be in red. Turns out my opponent is playing Brewer, so he's playing Dwarf Tribal for this game. We're going to have to mulligan here, but before we do that, let's take a look at the playing field. So again, my 3 blue rows, my opponent's 3 red rows. Each row has an associated point total. Right now, all the rows are set to 0, and each player has a net point total. Right now, we both have 0. So, Gwent is played out across 3 rounds. In each round, both players are trying to run up their own score because at the end of the round, the player with the highest score will be declared the winner of that round. Whoever wins 2 of the 3 rounds wins the match overall. We increase our score by playing cards to our side of the board and having the associated point totals on each card. For example, 6 power points in the top left-hand quarter of this Imperial Brigade would get added to our point total. So what's kind of key about this game is distribution of your resources across the 3 rounds. Currently, I have 11 cards, 10 from my deck plus my leader. I'm only ever going to draw another 3 cards in this entire game. I'm only going to draw 2 more cards at the start of round 2 and 1 more card at the start of round 1. And I have to plan how I'm going to play out that full set of resources across the 3 rounds in order to come out advantaged in 2 of the 3. So it's not like a best 2 out of 3 game of Magic where you're trying equally hard to win all 3 rounds and each round is really a game in itself. It's one game played out with one hand that goes for 3 rounds, and the challenge of the game is to allocate your resources to each round appropriately. Sometimes that means you don't even play a single card in a round. Sometimes it means that you play 4 or 5 cards in each of the 3 rounds. Sometimes it means that you play, almost every single card in one of the 3. It varies from game to game depending on how things play out. Anyway, we're going to get to business here and kind of look at our opening hand. Right away, I see a bit of a problem. We have Royal Decree as well as Ciri Nova in our hand. Royal Decree is a gold spell that lets us go and play any other gold spell from our deck. Almost always, we use that to go and find Ciri Nova. So having her in our hand isn't particularly useful here. In fact, it's making the Royal Decree almost dead. So I should put one of these 2 things back. Usually, it's the Ciri I'm going to put back because other cards in my deck might work well with that. So I'm going to put Ciri back here. Alright, then I can look at my silver cards. I've drawn 4 silvers here, which is pretty good. and they're all reasonably useful, especially in round 1. Cantarella is very good to have. She's a spy. She goes down on my opponent's side and actually counts towards his point total, but the benefits that she grants me are well worth that. Another spy here in Joachim de Wet. Again, he goes down on my opponent's side, so there's actually 5 points for my opponent, but the benefits that he provides to me are well worth it. Then a couple of controlling cards in Aeromancer and Dudu. And then my bronze cards up here, and these are the ones that I really have to think about mulliganing right now. Right now, the biggest problem is that I have 3 cards in hand that all care about me having spies, and not a ton of spies. I've got these 2, but I really like 3 spies in hand to make all these cards work. So the least useful one to me right now is the Nausicaa Brigade. Is that true? No, actually the least useful one to me right now is the Imperial Brigade, so I'm going to send that back. And I still need more spies. I think we can put Dudu back as well. Okay, so now the game begins. We flip a coin. The coin came up red, which means my opponent's going to start. And my opponent is going to lead on this guy, Yarpen. So now that we're actually playing, I'll talk about each individual card as it comes out. So Yarpen here is a dwarf. He has an ability that says whenever another dwarf ally appears, he gets boosted by 1. So right now he's only with 7 points. But as the round goes on, the number of points he's worth is going to steadily tick upwards. And he also has the Resilient ability, which means that when this round ends, he's not going to leave the battlefield. He's going to stick around and be 7 points for my opponent next turn as well. So we're not at all happy with that. This is kind of like 14 points for my opponent right here, when you consider the fact that it's 7 points for him in this round and 7 points in the next round. As a result, if we can kill this guy, then it's going to be pretty good for us. And we can. We can play out our Aeromancer, and this Weather Mage has 3 possible options on him. He can spawn Frost, Fog, or Alzur's Thunder. And that's the one we're actually going to use here to deal 9 damage and kill my opponent's dwarf. It is a little wasteful using a 9 damage spell to kill a 7-point creature. However, because this guy would come back next time, I'm actually taking a total of 14 points away from my opponent here and really getting quite a good rate. I could think of this as an 18-point turn. The 4 that or not an 18-point turn, yeah, an 18-point turn. The 4 that I got off of Aeromancer and the 14 I took away from my opponent split between the next 2 rounds. My opponent has another resilient creature here, but we're going to have a way to deal with that guy too. We're just going to have to get around to it. I think our next play out of hand is going to be Joachim de Wet here. So he's a spy. He goes down on my opponent's side, counts 5 points towards their total, but then he gets me a unit of my own and boosts it by 10. So really here, I got an 18-point unit for giving my opponent a 5-point unit. That's 13-point advantage for me, which is about normal for a silver card. But I also put a spy on my opponent's side, and that's always nice to do. Now he repaid the favor. He sent my guy back over to me, now spying for him, and he got a strong card out of the whole exchange. But overall, I think we're still going to come out pretty happy based on this whole interaction. We, at this point, are going to play out this guy, Rain Farm. He gets to grab a spy from my deck. He's going to grab an Emissary. This Emissary is going to spy for me on my opponent's side, and then draw me a unit of my choice. This is actually the one I was hoping for. The Infiltrator will come down on my side and transform his Mahakam Defender here into a spy. So a bunch of things happened because I did that. First of all, the introduction to new spies increased the power of my Imperial Brigade, but it's just dying now anyway. Secondly, because this guy is now a spy, I'm set up this turn to use my Nausicaa Brigade to kill it. So we got rid of one of my opponent's resilient creatures, one less thing for us to worry about in round 2. Unfortunate that our largest creature got killed, but hey, my opponent had to use one of the stronger gold cards, Geralt's Igni, to get rid of it. So we can't really complain too much here. Alright, so notice that we're up a card. We have 7 cards in hand and our opponent has 6, and we're also up a point. So we're definitely winning this round. We actually really want to convince our opponent to let us win this round. If we can force this round to us, if we can win this round, then we can actually make my opponent's carryover, in terms of this Mahakam Defender, useless, and get good use out of our Cantarella in round 2. And you'll see how that goes, assuming that I can make this all work the way I want it to, and actually win this round. But that's my game plan right now. It's critical that I win here. So, what am I going to do? I think what I'm going to do is play out just a big point play here, my Triss, and I'll just remove his Igni from the board. Making sure your opponent's board has fewer creatures is always good. An even 5 points of damage there on a 5-point creature is highly efficient. My opponent continues to boost up his Mahakam Defender here. If I was holding the spell Scorch in hand, I would be cackling right now because I'd be able to kill this thing. Unfortunately, I'm not. However, out of those 2 plays, I did pick up an extra 3 points of advantage, so I can't really complain. Let's see here. I think the next play is going to be this. I'm going to play the Medic, the Vicovaro Medic, and pull my opponent's own resilient creature out to my side. I have a bit of a complicated reason for doing this, which hopefully we'll get to see. Okay, so now I'm going to play my leader, Emhyr. His ability lets me play one of the cards from my hand straight up, so I'm going to play the Impera Enforcers. That's going to come in, and it's actually going to kill the spy that I've set up on my opponent's side, putting that spy into the graveyard, which is critical here. Then I get to pick up a card that I've already put down, so I'm going to pick up the Medic. Now I have that to play again, and I've set it up where there's a spy in my opponent's graveyard, so I can use this guy's ability to go and get that spy back for myself. So now I will play the Medic, pull the spy out of the graveyard, which I set up there. This allows me to pull a card from hand. I think it's actually going to be the Infiltrator in this case. Play the Infiltrator. I can turn one of my opponent's units into a spy at this point. It'll be Broover. And then I can deal damage to opponent's creatures. I will hit these guys. Take them both down a notch. Okay, so the net result of all of that is I now have this nice spy set up to take damage from my my guy here, my Nausicaa Brigade this turn. So we'll use the Brigade, kill Broover, who I set up as a spy, and now have this 11-point advantage over my opponent. We'll see if the opponent can even match that. Nope, they can't. Okay, so I'd really like to win this round. I'm 5 points ahead, a card ahead, and in fact, if my opponent wants to get past me, he has to put me 2 cards ahead. I don't know if he'll do that. We're going to take a look and see. But my future plays depend very much on whether he does or doesn't. No, my opponent just lets me win the round. Alright. So, okay. We have to decide now how we're going to play out this round. I think it's very straightforward for us. We're just going to play our Cantarella. We'll talk about that in a second. But we have to decide here on our mulligan strategy as well. We're totally happy with the Medic because there's so much we can pull out of our opponent's graveyard. Stregobor is a pretty darn good card, and we usually like to have him, but he does have a higher risk associated with him than some of my other cards, and I don't need to be risky right now because I'm so far ahead. So I'll put him back down, and then I get to lead here. Now, all I'm going to actually do is play out Cantarella here. And I guess before I do this, I'm going to explain what's going on. By playing out Cantarella, my opponent is going to be at 19, and I'm going to be at 6. Now, that's a place where my opponent feels like he has a comfortable advantage, but it's not such a large advantage that he can just pass. If he just passes, the 3 cards in my hand could easily make up the 13-point difference, and as a result, he would lose the full game because I would win 2 rounds. So instead, he's going to have to play a card out of his hand. And because of that, I'm going to waste that card. I'm going to draw the Slave Driver here. We're going to go into round 3 with me 2 cards ahead of my opponent. So that is one of the ways that these silver spies just become very, very, very useful to us. So we can just pass the turn now. And we have 4 cards to play, and our opponent only has 2, which means that we should easily be able to double our opponent's score in this last round. And that's just because we worked things out, making sure that we won round 1, and that we had that silver spy set up to really make round 2 work for us. What card don't we need here? I think probably the Imperial Brigade is our least important card. But there's always a risk too. If we throw one of these back and we draw our Siri Nova, then this card is totally useless. I think all these cards have some value to them, so we're just going to not bother to mulligan here. Opponent leads. So playing a resilient creature like this in round 3 is always a sign of weakness. You want to play these guys in rounds 1 or 2, because the fact that this guy carries over into round 3 just doesn't mean anything right now. We are going to start to set up some spies on our opponent's side. So we're going to put down our medic. Our medic can get back one of the spies we put there, like say the emissary. The emissary can pull another emissary out of our graveyard, or out of our deck, sorry, continuing to give us a lot of spies. We can get the ambassador as well. So just like that, we've set up 3 spies on our opponent's side on our first turn. This is the power of the medic. Because we set up these 3 spies now, we have some powerful options, but I think before we play out either of those, we're going to try the Slave Driver and see what we can pull out of our opponent's deck by doing this. Not a ton. We can grab this guy for a nice 12-point play. Didn't help us set up any further spies or anything, but that's okay. It was still a pretty strong bronze card. Opponent has nothing to search for with his Royal Decree. I am in much better position than that. I've got the Imperial Brigade, worth a full 12 points here because of my 3 spies. I've got the Imperial Enforcers, also a 12-point bronze because of my 3 spies. And then to really wrap things up, I've got Royal Decree for Siri Nova, my finisher, a 27-point card all on her own to come up with significant advantage over my opponent there. So we had no problems winning round 3. And that was just because we set ourselves up for it in rounds 1 or 2. We had a hard-fought round 1, which we came out ahead in. That let us play round 2 in order to take a full cards advantage. Going into round 3, 2 cards up on our opponent, gave us the easy victory. So that's Gwent. The strategies and the tactics are both really interesting. The deck building is a lot of fun. I recommend you try it out. Thanks so much for watching.